Okay, everyone, thank you for joining. We're going to be learning now Thursday night class. Hey, look at me in the camera. Better. I don't like the previous recording was like today they have cameras that can make you much better looking than you are. Isn't that cool? The one I used before was a lousy camera I used for the last class. And that was an important class, but not a good camera. It's a phone camera, but this is good. Thank God. Why is someone calling? Do you hear me? Is someone coming to tell me you don't hear? Let's see. Hello. It looks like we're working. It looks like it's. Who's that? Tell me who it is. On the phone. What does it look like? From where is that number? No, it shows up on the screen. No, on that screen. Yeah, on the screen. No, okay. No, you're here. It looks like Paul is saying he hears me. Okay, good. Sometimes people call right away, tell me something's wrong. Okay, we're good. We're good. I'm going to shut the door. You can shut the door so that just in case someone is calling. Okay. Am I being heard? If anybody that's listening can confirm, because I was okay, I think we're good. I think we're all good. Thank you. Okay, ready to go. I'm going to learn a nice, new, beautiful discourse on this week's Torah portion. So, we're going to learn a nice discourse on this week's Torah portion. Oh, good. I am being heard. That's good. Thank you. Okay, the discourse that we're going to learn is this week's Torah portion is Parsha Shalach. This is a discourse which was said by the Lubavitcher Rebi in 1959, in the summer of 1959. This would be this corresponding Shabbos, the blessing of the month of Tammuz, 1959, is when this discourse was said. And this discourse I titled Empowering God's Kingship. It's working. I'm getting from everybody that they hear. It's working. It's all good. No worries. Okay. So, in this week's Torah portion we have, so I called it Empowering God's Kingship because it's going to explain in a very beautiful way the ability, the impact that each and every one of us can have on expanding God's kingship. And the significance of expanding that kingship, which means revitalizing and energizing Hashem as a king in the world, bringing higher lights down into kingship. And I believe that this has very big ramifications to our avoda right now, in which we have the ability through a deep prayer, various different expressions, precisely with our mouth, that we are able to empower Mashiach's kingship. Because Mashiach is the human physical vehicle for God's kingship to manifest. So although the Rebbe in this discourse is not talking about Mashiach, but it applies to Mashiach as well, as will become obvious, as we will see. So I think it's a very apropos discourse, a very beautiful discourse, and let's go. So this week we find Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, is pleading with God to forgive the Jewish people after the sin of the spies. And he says he says something like quite astounding. This is in Numbers, in Bamidbar, chapter 14, verse 17. He says, Va'ata, and now, Yigdal no Koach Ado, and it says God's name. And now, let the power of Aleph Daled Nun Yud, which is God. Let the power of the Lord become great. What does that mean? We'll see in a moment. Moshe is pleading that God's power should increase. That goes back to the question we were dealing with last week. How much influence do we have on God? You know, there are those who are always of the opinion that God is untouchable and you can't affect him and so on and so forth. And here it seems that God and Moshe is praying that God's power should increase. But on the simple level, as we're going to see, what it means is that Moshe is saying that God should increase his own power to forgive. A human being is limited in how much tolerance and how much ability they're able to forgive someone who offended them. But being that God is infinite, so when God can increase his unique power of being God, of being able to forgive, to be able to increase that power. And therefore Moshe says, Kasha dibarta lemor, like you, God, has spoken. And as meaning to say, not like I have said, but as you have said. And what is it? What does he mean? Kasher dibarta lemor, like you spoke, like God, you spoke. So the simple meaning, and this is the way Rashi interprets it, to mean like you spoke in the next sentence. What's the next sentence? Hashem erech hapayim. Moshe goes on to list the 13 attributes of mercy. Here is where Moshe pulls out the 13 attributes of mercy that God had already revealed to him at an earlier stage after the sin of the golden calf. This is a couple of months later. The sin of the golden calf, all right? And this is not just a couple of months. This is about a year later. So when the Jewish people sinned with the golden calf on the 17th of Tammuz, a month after the giving of the Torah, at the end of the 40 days, at that time, God was angry and he was going to wipe out the Jewish people. Moshe managed to negotiate that God should forgive them. But over there, God reveals a secret to Moshe. Moshe then elicits that the merit of our forefathers, the merit of the patriarchs. Moshe says to God that even if we don't have any merit, but there's great merit, the Jewish people have the merit of their ancestors. Let that stand by them. So, and God accepted it. But God says, what happens if that merit is going to run out? What happens if we're going to use up, if we're going to run out of merit of the fathers? What's going to be in further times? How are you going to evoke mercy and merit for the Jewish people? So God says, let me teach you something. I'm going to reveal to you my infinite treasure of kindness and compassion. And they're called the 13 attributes of compassion. When you will evoke these 13 attributes of compassion, then you will bring out a side of me that can be infinite tolerant and infinitely forgiving. And therefore, there will be no end to and therefore you can always rely on this. You can always pull this out. And so this is what God told Moshe after the Jewish people made their first major sin. A year later, when they sinned by the spies, it's a little bit over a year. It's a year and 3 weeks later. When all the Jewish people doubted and they cried all night, whatever, and they didn't want to go into the land of Israel. They said, why'd you take us out of Egypt? And so on and so forth. So God again is getting really upset. And Moshe then does what God instructed him last time. Pulls out the 13 attributes. And this is what he evokes over here. But he says, like you spoke. And like it says in the next verse, Hashem erech hapayim, you spoke. It actually only mentions 9 of those attributes, and it's a good question why only 9 are mentioned over here, not all 13. But Moshe is kind of tugging at those 13 attributes of mercy that God taught him. What does he emphasize, like you spoke, saying? Because the Talmud relates a story that when God said to Moshe, I am, the first time, Hashem keil erech apayim, that God, I am very slow to get angry, and that I am very forgiving. Moshe said to God, oh, that must be to the righteous. To people that are righteous, that God. So God said, no, also to the wicked. So Moshe is now saying to God, like you said, not only, and God says to Moses, I promise you, you'll once need it. Because Moshe thought that God will be all forgiving. Okay, the righteous that are, to them, God is showing this infinite mercy. But those that are wicked, they don't deserve it. So God says, no, for the wicked as well. So now Moshe says, like you spoke, not like I said, that even for the wicked, you're tolerant. So that's the simple meaning. The Rebi is now going to, however, give another two interpretations. Let's put it this way. He's going to give another interpretation, one interpretation, but that interpretation is nuanced. One more interpretation that it's nuanced really as two. The question over here, what does it mean? Moshe says to God, let your strength, let your power, God, increase. That's not the question. But what does he mean, like you spoke, saying? So according to this first interpretation that I just gave you, these words, like you spoke, is not referring that your power should increase. That's Moshe saying, God, let your power of forgiveness be increased. Inflate your power of forgiveness. Now is the time to inflate it, to increase it, to pump it, pump that energy. What he means, however, when he says, like you said, saying, according to Rashi's interpretation, it's referring to the next verse. What did you say? You say you are all forgiving. That's what you said. And when did you say that? A year ago you said it to me. Moses said, when you showed me at Sinai, when I went up to the mountain to gain forgiveness, you showed me your 13 attributes of mercy. So that's what it means. Kasha dibarta, like you spoke, lemar, saying a long time ago. However, the Rebbe is now going to bring in other interpretations that the words kasha dibarta, lemar, like you spoke, saying, is referring to the beginning of this verse. Like you spoke that your power should be increased. Va'ato Yigdal no Koach Hashem. Let your power be increased. Like you spoke. Like you spoke what? Like you spoke that your power should be increased. That's what God spoke. That's going to be the interpretation. It's not referring to the 13 attributes of mercy that he mentions in the next verse, but rather it's referring to what he just stated. Let your power be increased like you said it should be increased. Okay, so let's read inside. Allow, let your power be increased. The power of Adonai, let be increased like you spoke, saying. Pirish Rashi explains. What is the, so this is the first interpretation that he brings. What did you say, God? Hashem erech apayim, that God has patience, he doesn't get angry fast. The simple implication of the words are Shahadibur da HaKadosh Baruch Hu kashadibarta hu Yigdal kayachad. See, Rashi, the reason why Rashi makes his comment, the Rebi says like this, from the very fact that Rashi has to explain kashadibarta lemar, like you said, saying. Rashi says it's referring to the next verse. Why does Rashi have to say anything? You're going to read the next verse. You're going to see what it means. Kasha dimarto lemer, like you said, saying Hashem erech apayim. We know we're going to read the next verse. We'll see that. The reason why Rashi has to point you to the next verse is because without Rashi, you would understand it to mean differently. That what? Let your power be increased like you spoke. Like you spoke what? That your power should be increased. Not the next verse. From the very fact that Rashi has to point you to the next verse and say, Kash Dibarta means, like it says in the next verse, is Rashi doesn't want you, according to Rashi, to make the mistake to read it that it's referring to this verse. That when it says, like you said, is referring to let God's power become great. You shouldn't learn that. We should learn that it means like you say in the next verse. What is that? Hashem Erech Apayim. The very fact that Rashi says that is telling us that the simple reading without Rashi is Kasher Dibarta is referring to Va'ata Yigdal na Koach Hashem. Let the power of God become great. That God said that. Now, when did God say that? We don't know. But you said that. That we know. That's what Moshe is saying. The mashmas lashon hakaz bepashtus ushadibed kasher dibarta hu yigdal koach adna is that the koach of adna should become great. Well, hutzrich Rashi lefarish, and that's why Rashi needed to explain that even though that might be true on some level, but shalpi derech pshat, but according to simple pshat, according to the simple meaning, apirushu Hashem erech apayim. The pirush is that when it says kasher dibarta lemar is not what kasher dibarta like you spoke earlier, like what you said in this verse, but what the verse is going to continue in the next verse. But from this that the verse says in this verse, from this, so even though Rashi tells us not to read it this way, but since the verse leads you on to read it the way we presented now, that kasher dibarta means like you spoke, means what did God speak? Let his name, let his that his power should become great. That's what he spoke. That's the simple meaning. Must be that too is a pshat. That too is a legitimate reading in the verse. Mashma implies shekavanes akasavu gam le'inyan zeh, that the intention of the verse is also for this. For those that are losing what I am saying, I'm feeling maybe you might not realize, it might not grasp what I'm trying to say. Is let me make it simple. There are two ways to understand what Moshe says when he says, like you spoke, saying. Okay, he uses those words, like you spoke, saying. Moshe is saying something should happen like God spoke, saying. So what is that God spoke, saying? Here are the two options. One of them is what it continues to say in the next verse. Saying what? But it says in the next verse. What is that? The 13 attributes of mercy. Then it's referring to something that God told Moshe a year earlier, and Moshe is now helping God recall, so to speak, what he spoke a year earlier, reminding God, you said that you will forgive them. So that's one way of learning it, and that's how Rashi learns. But there is another way of learning it. That when it says, like you spoke, saying, it's not referring to the further sentence, but rather it's referring to this, to the beginning of this verse. What's the beginning of this verse? And now let your power be increased. Like you said. So the like you said is referring to that God somewhere, somehow said that his power should be increased. So Moshe is saying, now let your power be increased like you said. So the Rebi is saying both interpretations are correct. One, according to Rashi, it's referring to next verse. But since, even though Rashi says that, the Rebbe says, but since the simple reading of the verse is like you said, is implying to what he just said right now, it implies that too is a correct reading. So therefore we have two interpretations of how do you understand when it says, like you said, saying. Okay, I think now it's much clearer. Now, to prove this idea that you could read this verse when it says, like you said, that it's not referring to the continuation of the next verse, but rather on the increasement of the power of God itself. Well, the Talmud seems to imply that. The Gemara says, this is a Gemara in Masechtas Shabbos, Tractate Shabbos, on page 89. It says like this, at the time that Moshe went up to the heavens. By the way, for those who want to know where this discourse is, it is printed, of course you can find it in the year Tafshin Yotes, in the Rebbe's discourses, from the year 1557, 59. not 57:59, 57:19, 19:59. Or you can also find it in Melukot. It's one of the edited discourses in Melukot Chele Gimel, third volume of Melukot. Okay, where they have a collection of discourses. Any case, so the Talmud says over there as follows. Fascinating passage of the Talmud. When Moshe went up to the heavens above to receive the Torah, he saw God putting the final touches to the Torah scroll. We learned about this already when we were learning about Rebi Akiva. What was God doing? God was finishing up the crowns on top of the, like a scribe was writing the letters. You make crowns on the letters. God was touching up the Torah with crowns. So God says to Moshe, Moshe looks into what God is doing. God says to Moshe, there's no hello in your city. You guys, when you come from, people don't say hi. You didn't say anything. You don't say hi, shalom to me. You just walk in like that and don't say anything. Anyways, and Moshe answered something to the effect that, like who am I to bless you? Like, God says you should have. So God says, answers Moshe, you should have helped me. You should have assisted me. Hayalachla azreini, you should have assisted me. What kind of assistance could have Moshe given to God? You should have told me that I should be successful in my work. It's like you tell someone when a person goes out to do a certain business, you tell them tatzliach. Or people say a lot of times, bracha v'atzlacha, blessing and success. So God says to Moshe, it's only nice, it would be menschlich, it would be nice of you if you would give me a blessing. I'm busy with a very important thing over here. I'm putting together my Torah. So it would be nice if you would. God says to Moshe, you should have helped me, assisted me, by doing what? By telling me, tatzliach b'melachtecha, titzlach b'melachtecha. You should have atzlacha, you should have success in your work. Miyad. So when Moshe hears God say that, Omar lo, Moshe said, okay. Moshe gets the cue. What does he say? He says to God, Va'ato Yigdal na koach adna kasha dibart. Moshe now says to God, and now may your power be increased like you spoke, saying. What does that mean? I'm giving you a blessing, God, that your power should increase, that you should be good. You should deliver a good piece of work. It's like an artist or any creative person needs a blessing for creativity. So Moshe says to God, your power should increase, that you should do a good job, and you should be satisfied with your product that you're going to produce, the Torah. It should all work out really well for you. And Moshe says, don't look at me like how disrespectful that is. Yeah? Moshe says, don't look at me that's disrespectful, that I'm giving you a blessing that you like. This is God. Moshe is telling God, you should be successful in your work. That's a little bit, So that would look arrogant on Moshe's end, that he's giving God a blessing. So Moshe right away says, like you said I should say. I'm just saying what you told me. And that's the meaning of kasher dibarta, like you spoke lay more that I should say. You told me to give you a blessing and tell you should have success. I am giving you that blessing right now by saying va'ato yigdal na, and now let your power be increased. It's a whole different interpretation in this verse. But what do you see from the Talmud's depiction of a certain dialogue between Moses and God? According to the Talmud, when God is saying, when Moshe says, like you spoke, saying, it has nothing to do with the next verse about the 13 attributes. We're not even talking about the 13 attributes. What did God tell him to say? That God should be successful. That it should be a blessing, that Moses should bless God, that he should be successful. And that's the content of let your name be great. Let your power, Koach Adna, let the power of Hashem be great. Let it increase. Here's your blessing you asked me to give you. But you see from here that the words kasher dibarta is referring to this verse, that God's power should become increased. Not like Rashi, Rashi also knows what it says in the Talmud. But when Rashi is giving his commentary on Chumash, Rashi is following not midrashic explanations. Rashi is following simple meaning of the words. So Pshutei Shel Mikra, it's referring to the next verse. But according to the midrashic story, it's a whole midrash. It's a whole different story. Okay. So Hashem says to Moshe, "Yalach le'ezreini, you should have helped me. That's why Rashi says, you should be matzliach in your work. You should have success in your work. So Moshe right away says, like you spoke, Hainu. The kasher dibarta, according to this Talmud, the word kasher dibarta, kol amira, is referring to that statement that you should have assisted me. The inyan la'azreini, what does it mean to assist me? Sheyeh ezer ha'safa. But now the Rebbe is explaining. God said to Moshe, God never told Moshe that the koach of Ado of Hashem should become increased. God said to Moshe, say that I should be successful. What did Moshe say? Now let the power of God be increased. And did God tell him to say that? So the Rebbe is explaining, yeah. Because giving God a blessing that he should be successful means that he should be as godly great as God can be, and do it perfectly like only God can do. And so that's the content of what Moshe is saying. So the words "Va'ato Yigdal na Koach adna," God, don't do a mediocre job. Let your godly talents really come out and do something really powerful. That's the meaning of increase your power. Increase your power and deliver. Deliver like only God can deliver. So then it's clear that when God said to Moshe, you should bless me, meaning give me encouragement. So Moshe's statement is actually perfect fulfillment of what God has says. You should have assisted me. So Moshe actually is doing that. Okay. How do you assist God? You can't give him anything, but you can inspire him that he should dig out his own power. That's the point. Increase your power or reveal more of your power. As he explains, when he says kasher dibarta, it's referring to what God said, you should help me, which is the same idea of ata yigdalna, the inyan la'azreini, the meaning of you should assist me. There should be an assistance in the power in the supreme power. And that's the idea of hu yigdal koach. This is the meaning of let the power of Aleph, Dalet, Nun, Yud, let the power of the master be increased. Okay. So now what the Rebi did was, he supported the idea that kasher dibarta, like you spoke, is referring to the beginning of the verse. Like you spoke, that your power should be increased. Okay? V'yesh lahoisef. However, if you think about it, it's a little bit different than what we were saying earlier. That's why I told you that we're going to present a different interpretation than Rashi. And the second interpretation is one interpretation, but forks into two. Why? It's a little different than what we said before. Initially, when I told you this, before we knew the whole story of God with Moses, with the whole thing, like when God was making the crowns and the whole thing, before we even knew that story, we presented that the word kasher dibarta means, like you spoke, what did God speak? Let the power of God become great. That somewhere God said that. Like you spoke that the power of God, the power of the master should become great. But what we didn't say is kasher dibarta leimor, that God spoke that Moshe should say it. According to what the Gemara is saying, what the Talmud is saying, is kasher dibarta is going back to God, like you spoke. Leimor, saying, who should say? So according to the Talmud, leimor, that Moshe should say. You said to me that I should say. Oops. So I'm saying. Leimor means that Moshe should say. My glasses broke this week, and I was away, so I didn't fix it. And it's been standing in its space miraculously. But I know that during the class, I get a little wild. So let me see how many times it's going to fall out. If anybody wants to do betting on the comments, you can bet on how many times it's going to fall. Let's see who's going to win the bet. If you're here, you'd be able to get an extra plate of cholent. Any case, okay. So the lamar is, according to that interpretation, means like you spoke that I should say. However, you can also read it like you spoke saying. The word lamar doesn't mean that someone else should say, but like you say, so and so said, saying, quote. It's like you're saying, quote. Saying is like when the Torah says God spoke to Moshe saying, it's like God spoke to Moshe, quote, this is what he said. So when we can so now there's going to be a third interpretation. Not like you spoke that I should say that your power should become great, but that you spoke saying that your power should become great. Based on that, we're going to have three interpretations now in the word kasher dibarta leimor. It divides in two, but it's really the second one. It's really two, but one of them has two interpretations in the nuance. What the Rebi is going to do is going to take all three interpretations and he's going to make a beautiful braided challah. How all three interpretations complement each other. And in doing so, he's going to reveal the most incredible, deep, mystical ideas and powerful ideas. Okay, so it's a little technical in the beginning, but then it becomes very cosmic. So what are the three interpretations? Again, let the power of God increase, like you spoke saying. First interpretation is that it's referring, when it says like you spoke saying, it's referring to what you said, the 13 attributes of mercy, like you said a long time ago, and the increasement of God's power means that you should increase your power to forgive. But when it says like you said, it's not like you said that you will increase your power, but like you said that these are my attributes. God is long to get angry and so on and so forth. So that's Rashi's interpretation in Chumash. Then there's another interpretation that kasher dibarta, like you spoke, is referring to the beginning of the verse. What did you speak? That your power should become great. That's what you spoke. But in that itself, there's two ways of learning it. Number one is like you spoke. God never said those words that his power should be great, but rather like you spoke saying means you told me to tell you that. So I am telling you that. Meaning you told Hashem said to Moshe that Moshe should help him. And Moshe is now therefore saying it like you told me to tell you that I should assist you. So I'm assisting you right now by telling you your power should be great. Or another interpretation is now let your power become great like you spoke saying, what did you say? You said that your power should be great. God said his power should be great, not Moshe said. So these are three interpretations of what means kasher dibarta leimor. Okay, let's read it inside. Now we can add The mashmas lashon hakasav kashi dibarta leimor. The simple meaning of the verse is like you spoke, saying who shahadibur da hakadosh baruch hu leimor shamoishe yoimer. The implication of the verse when it says leimor saying is that Moshe should say it. It can move in like Kamayim Mamar Zala now, like we said from Chazal. The kasha dibarta kol masha Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu Moshe is what God said to Moshe. Hayalachala Ezreini. You should have assisted me. And what should Moshe say? Sheyomar Shemoshe Yomar. That Moshe should say Titzlach Malachtacha. Your work should be successful. Valpia Yedua. So, based on what we know, but we have three interpretations now. That all the explanations in one verse, although they're different explanations by different commentators, yet because they're all commentators on one verse and they're all Torah interpretations, they all have to complement each other. And if we're seeing various different interpretations that don't complement each other, it's because we haven't dug deep enough. When we dig deep enough, we realize how each one, even though they look so different, but they're all complementary to each other. So Shaykh Hamzel move on, it's understood. The Gimel Perushim Eila, that these three Perushim, Bekasha Dibarta, when it says, like you spoke, what does it mean, like you spoke? One Perush is like you spoke, Shekah Yigdal na Koach Hashem, that it's referring to Yigdal na Koach Hashem. So Kasha Dibarta means like you spoke, like you yourself said that your power should become great. We don't know when God said that, but like you said, your power should become great. That's one interpretation. Or Kasha Dibarta, like you spoke, is referring to like you spoke, Lamar, that I should say, that Moshe should say. Right? That's nuanced a little different. What should I say? I should say something that will make your power become great. So either that, like you spoke yourself, that your power should become great, or like you spoke that the word Yigdal na kashed dibarta, like you spoke Lamar, that you spoke that I should say, that Moshe should say. And the third interpretation is it's referring to Hashem Erech Apayim, the next verse, that God is slow to get angry. And so we have to say that these three interpretations, Shaykh Hamzel have a connection one to the other. Tzarech lahav and Shaykh is the Gimel Perushim Eilo. We need to understand the connection of these seemingly unrelated interpretations in the verse, or at least one of them is very unrelated. The other two are pretty similar. One is that Moshe should say it, or that God himself was said it. But fine, but it's the same idea that he said that his power should become increased. But how do you connect it with the other Pirush that it's referring to a whole different thing? That what God spoke another time when he said, what did he speak? What did he say? The 13 attributes of mercy. Okay. So we go to the second chapter, and the point over here is like this. Let's get in deeper over here and say, what does Moshe want to accomplish here? What does Moses want to accomplish here? Like it continues in the verse, after he mentions the 13 attributes of mercy, what does he request? He says, forgive the sin of the people. Atone for the sin of the Jewish people. It should be forgiveness, atonement. And mechila means forgiveness. Slicha means, how do they translate slichas? Must be different words that they use. Atonement. I know kapara is atonement. Mechila means forgiveness. And slicha means, I don't remember. But in any case, it's these three things. Al chetam haraglim. Moshe is asking for complete cleansing and purification and forgiveness for the sins of the spies. Comes out that the underlying message of this petition that Moshe is speaking to God now is to bring about atonement for a big sin. Therefore, based on that, we'll understand why there are multi-layers in this verse. The Rebbe is going to explain how in this one verse, the reason why there are various different interpretations is because in order to atone for something, we have to affect something on various different levels. And each layer of the verse, based on the different interpretation, is tapping into another aspect of atonement. Now, I'm very excited we're learning this because I mentioned in the Tuesday night class that this year, the event that is happening in Israel, when Israel rose like a lion to fight this war, it's a complete atonement for the sin of the spies. This year, there's no more. This Shabbos, don't even flinch for 1 second when you read the story. Don't be in pain at all about the story because it's totally, we've atoned for it completely. There is not even a trace of a trace. Because the sin, as I discussed on the Tuesday class, which was supposed to be the Monday class, but Tuesday class, is that the whole sin back then was that they doubted God's power and they were scared of the giants of the major powers to go to war with them because they doubted God's power. And this year, a tiny little nation went out to war against Iran, knowing the whole world will basically, even America's hesitating to come to their assistance. And that's part of it. The Jewish people don't have to be afraid of anybody. It'd be nice if Trump joins. If he doesn't, that'll be his loss. We got God backing us. If you don't realize it, then you're blind. This is impossible. Impossible. What's going on in Israel now is impossible. But the fact that the Israeli army even went off on such a mission that was so insane, okay, they had no choice, but still, it has to make some level of sense. To go into such, it's in a sense, it's a reckless behavior. It's crazy. Well, you know you have God, you know you're backed by miracles. You can do it. But that's exactly what the Jewish people were lacking when they sinned, that got God so upset then. You know I'm behind you. Why are you so afraid? Now we went out against all the giants. So this year we have atonement. So it's really nice to learn to affect atonement on all levels of how it's going to affect this atonement. It's great. When you atone, and by the way, as I mentioned in the Tuesday class, it's the sin of the spies that brought us both all the exiles. It brought us the first Tisha B'Av. It brought us the second Tisha B'Av. It brought us all the tzaris, all the pain and suffering that we've had for thousands of years. It's all related to that sin. So now that it's rectified, it's over. We're going home. We're going home and building the third temple, and it's going to be good. Okay. That's just a advertisement for the Monday class, the Tuesday class. If you haven't listened to it, it's worth listening to it. It's called The Grand Finale is finally here, something like that. And in atonement, there's two elements. The root from where of atonement, the way atonement works is that you have to reach a place where the offense has not scarred. When two people are bound up and connected to each other, so if their relationship is a very external relationship, or even if it's not very external, but it's an external relationship that goes from the external into the internal, which means the relationship begins from the outside in, from externalities, and then they get closer to each other, and then they become strongly bound up with each other. It's then possible that if there is an offense, that the offense and an insult or whatever it is in the relationship, that it can erode the bond. It can cause an erosion in the bond. And sometimes it can be beyond repair. Because as far deep as they're connected to each other, that's how much you want to hurt the other one. and therefore there's no place for forgiveness. But there are certain relationships that are of essence. And although the relationship is of essence, there is a more experiential element of it, which is the more external element of the relationship. In other words, there's the conscious level of the relationship. I love you because of all the beautiful things you do for me and all the beautiful things that I see in you and so on and so forth. But that's the conscious level of it. But there's something much deeper than that. You are mine because you're mine, and I'm yours because I'm yours. It's not based on anything. So relationships like that, like a parent-child relationship and things like that, which have a core essential component to it. So then, even if there's a breach on the consciousness, in other words, according to my mind, I'll find all the reasons why I can't stand you anymore. I hate you, I hate you, I hate you, I'm so angry, you did something to me, I go, right? I never want to see you again. Right? A person can get so mad and so upset. But that's true on a conscious level. But there is still, deep inside, much deeper than they're still one. And usually, what's going to happen is it's going to bother me that I lost you that we broke up or whatever. It's going to hurt me deeply. Why? Because I really do want to be in a connection. Because I really do love you, even if I say I hate you. So what does that mean? That means that the relationship is deeper. So with a God, our bond with God is not. There are the external elements of the bond. It's based on the Jewish people willfully accepting God's kingship, willfully accepting the Torah, and so on and the like. But that's all the outside. There's something much deeper. There's an essential bond. So how do you gain for atonement? You gain atonement by scratching past, by drilling past the surface, and getting to a place where the bond is just absolute, where it can never be shooken. And which basically means getting to the superconscious of God. That's really what it means. The offense happens in the more revealed side of God. That would be like a person's intelligence and emotions. God too has intelligence and emotions. But just like we have a depth of being beyond our intelligence and emotion, God too also has a depth of being beyond intelligence and emotion. That level where God stands beyond his intelligence and his emotions, that level is called above the order of evolution, above the entire system of worlds. God as he truly is for himself. And on that transcendental level, there is nothing we can do that can ever cause a blemish in this place. Because since the relationship is not about anything, it's not conditioned on anything, it's not a conditional love, it's not based on any earning of any deservance, it just is. So then no cause can damage it. No offense can damage it. However, that's in the core, above conscious level, so to speak, of the divine, or the inner super rational levels of God. But God doesn't operate with, God doesn't interact with the world and with the Jewish people from that level. God interacts from a level of emotion and reason and so on and so forth. And on that reason, on that level, the relationship was stained. The relationship was hurt. So that's why he's saying over here in the discourse, in order to bring forgiveness, you have to elicit from a place that's above reason. It's above a breach in the relationship. And from that higher place, you draw down that energy from that higher place. You tap that higher place, and from there you can restore the relationship. Because on that level, we never disconnected. However, the Rebbe says, but that's not enough. That's not enough. Because for a moment, I can forget my emotions. For a moment, I can forget my reasoning, and I can kind of climb deep inside into my essence. but I'm not going to stay in my essence forever. I'm going to come out more into a more revealed aspect of my personality, my emotions, my understanding, and so on and so forth. And on there is a big scar. I'm going to return back. And almost like, you're my child. I love you so much, and I can't believe that I was upset at you. I loved you so much. I can't believe I'm so upset at you because you wrecked my entire kitchen. Literally everything that I cared about. You wrecked it. You messed it up. Everything you made filthy, dirty, disgusting. I'm so angry at you. Or you ruined something that I cherish very much. Something that I really built. I put so much work in. The work I've been doing for my work. I've put in hours and months and years for this thing, and you came and deleted the entire file. And I don't have it anymore. And I've lost 10 to 5 years of research. Imagine that. I'm really angry. Oh, so if it's a stranger, and I know that you did it deliberately, whatever, you carelessly, recklessly, I'm never going to forgive you again. But if you're my one and only daughter, and you say, Ma, you're my mom. I know I was wrong, but you're my mom. So then, as a mother, as a dad, as a thing, you're still my child. You're more important to me than my file and my work and everything. Yeah, that's work. That's good. We can sit together and have that moment of deep connection. We can have coffee at Starbucks and feel very close to each other. And very connected. But that's only going to last as long as we're sitting in Starbucks and we forgot about everything. We're just connecting because we're chill. Because you're my parent, I'm your child. But when the parent is going to go back to the kitchen or go back to the office or go back to their business and they're going to find a mess again, and so they're going to drop, their consciousness is going to drop from the deeper, higher self into the everyday living self. It all comes right back again. I'm going to have to come and deal again with all the emotions and all the anger and all the upsetness that I have. And then it's going to hurt me all over again. I'm angry at you again. So it's not enough to tap and go to a place you need to go there. Because only from there can you replenish the relationship, can you restore the relationship, because you can access a place where you never ever disconnected. But it's not enough. What has to happen? You need to draw that deeper relationship, that deeper bond. You need to go from Starbucks and you have to go back to the kitchen where you made the mess. And over there, bring in the mother-child relationship into the kitchen. You have to bring it into the office. You have to bring it into you have to bring it down to the place where there is a scar, to the place where there is an offense, the place that I am hurt. You have to bring this deeper place into the place where the hurt is, and over there, repair the hurt. Then the relationship can now be rejuvenated, replenished, fixed, and everything can be good. So what the Rebi is saying is that the secret for atonement is, number one, you have to go beyond the hurt. You have to go beyond the place where the hurt doesn't matter. You have to go very, very high up, but you can't stay high up. You have to bring that deeper, higher connection down to the place where the pain was the pain is real and hurts, and over there you have to make that repair. So spiritually, in God, these two levels are Keter and Malchus. Kesser means the crown, and Malchus means kingship. The place where God is most interacting with the world is his kingship, because that's his connection with the creation. He's a master over the world. He's the creator of the world. We're all the subjects. And in that attribute of kingship is where we can hurt him the most. Or we can be helpful the most and provide him the greatest pleasure. But at the same time, we can hurt him the most. Because when we wreck his kingship, when we destroy when we don't take him seriously as a king, and so on and so forth, that's an offense. In the context of kinship is where the most effect on God through our actions or misdeeds, where we can cause hurt, is in kingship. So if you want to get forgiveness, you can't gain forgiveness by evoking kingship, because kingship is, if you broke the kingship, that place can never repair it. So you have to go much deeper into God, to a place where God is above being a king. How deep? A place where he is above the entire order of evolution to the worlds. He's not even a source correlated. He's above the worlds entirely. He's infinite. He's beyond it all. And therefore, the matters of kingship or not kingship doesn't really matter on that deep level. And since as a soul, as a Jewish soul, we're connected to God's private self above creation, that level is called Kesser, the crown. And through teshuvah, through a repentance, we can reach that very high level. And it's as if we never blemished. However, it's not enough to just evoke the energies of Keter. We have to draw the energies of Kesser down into Malchus, so that it should heal the wound that was created in Malchus. And that's how we gain forgiveness. So therefore, the Rebbe is going to say, that's the meaning of what Moshe is trying to do over here. Moshe is doing repair in this, he's seeking atonement. So he says, and now let the power of God become great, like you spoke, saying. Rashi says, what did God speak? God spoke, what is it referring to? Rashi says it's referring to the 13 attributes of mercy. Oh. Because the 13 attributes of mercy, that's God being infinite, above a relationship with the world, God not having any bit of grievances. Over there, he is untouchable, uninsultable, unoffensible. He's not in that. And over there, it's just infinite kindness and goodness. So that's one aspect of it. Now let God's greatness be increased. Like you spoke, saying, what did he speak? Hashem Erech Apayim, 13 attributes of mercy. Which we know the 13 attributes of mercy are all in the Keter, in the crown. However, you got to fix the blemish when God will return to his small self, when God will return back into the consciousness of Malchut, when God will shrink himself to become small little king over the universe, where he got very offended and hurt by us not taking him seriously. You have to bring and that's the meaning of, now let the power of Aleph, Daled, Nun, Yud become great. Because Aleph, Daled, Nun, Yud is the name of God's kingship. From all the names, various different names. Aleph, Daled, Nun, Yud means master, which means king. So the other interpretations are related more to the effect in Malchus. Yigdal na Koach Adna. To bring, Yigdal na means to increase the power of Adna, because Adna, Aleph, Daled, Nun, Yud, has been wounded. Adna is hurting. How do you fix Adna? By bringing in lights from above, from higher places, bringing in the more transcendental energies, which causes a softening of the hurt and the pain in Adna, and a forgiveness in the place where the damage was. Let's read inside. In forgiveness, there's two dimensions. The shayrish aslicha, the root of forgiveness, is from a level that is gone completely above the whole evolving order of the worlds. In order to fill a blemish where there is something lacking or some kind of a hurt, you need to draw down. You need to access a place. You need to tap a place, a very high place, where there is not possible to have any blemishes. A very, very high level where there is no blemish. But in order to have the actual forgiveness, You gotta draw it down in the place where the pagam was. In other words, you need to reach a place that's above the blemish, but then you need to bring that and expose that higher energy into the place where the damage happened. And this is the meaning of Ato Yigdal no Koach Adna. Moshe Rabbeinu is trying to repair the damage of the sin of the spies. And he says, Kasha dibarto lemer, like you spoke, saying. What did he say? Hashem erech apayim. God is patient. He doesn't get angry. So the shayrish aslicha, because the root of forgiveness, hu mebchinas Hashem erech apayim, is from a very lofty level, from the level of Kesser, which is Hashem erech apayim, Yud Gimel Midas Arachamim, which we know the 13 attributes of mercy are all the way up in the crown, and the crown represents God as He is above and aloof and much higher than any effect being impacted by anything that happens in the world. And that is Shalamayla Mishtalshalos, that is completely above the Hishtalshalot, that it's completely above. The Rebbe says on the bottom, look in the Arizal, in Lakuti Torah to the Ari, why, if we're trying to evoke the 13 attributes, how come Moshe only mentioned 9 out of the 13 over here? I didn't look it up. I don't know. I can maybe look that up. Be a project. Why Moshe evokes only the 9? But the main point is it's of the 13, which the 13 is this very lofty level of Keter, where there is no damage, where all the effects of the world cannot reach. Yud Gimel Sarachim Shalamayla Mishtalshalos, that are above the entire order. The Yigdal Koach Adna, but then that's Hashem Erech Apayim. But when Moshe also adds, let the power of Aleph Daled Nun Yud, let the power of Adonai, which is God's name, let that power increase. That's the repair in the place that was hurt. Hu Shetiyah Hamshacha Lamata Ba'adna. That we should draw down this great repairing energy should be brought back down to the place where the pain is. And the reason for that is the takein hapagam, in order to be able to fix the blemish. The shem adna hu b'malchus, because the name of Aleph Daled Nun Yud is in Malchut, is in Kingship. Rapagam the cheta meraglim, and the pagam, and the blemish of the sin of the spies. Now he's going to explain why the blemish was in Malchus, in Kingship. So, in addition to the idea that any sin affects the most God's kingship, that's why we learned many times that tshuva means toshuv hay, restoring the hay, because the hay of God's name, which is symbolizes Malchut, in the Tetragrammaton, Yud Kei Vav Kei, the hay represents the Malchut. The Malchus is the most dragged down through our sins, the most impacted by us. That's in general. He's going to show over here that by the sin of the spies, it was particularly the type of sin that was affecting kingship. Why? So it was more than just the fact that that's the closest to us, and that's why God takes offense on that level more than at any other level. But particularly, it was offensive to that level. Why? The sin of the spies were, in addition to what I said earlier, they doubted God, this, that, but there's a deeper reason. It says they didn't want to go into the land of Israel because it was too materialistic for them. And even though only in the land of Israel were they able to do the material mitzvahs, many of the commandments were only applicable once they will become farmers and they will deal with the land itself. Still, they felt that it's serving God by doing a physical action doesn't come close to the experiences of the desert in which they can study Torah and connect much more and connect God to God most spiritually, emotionally, intellectually. And they felt that would be a much richer connection and a bond than going into the land, becoming working people, and doing physical mitzvot. And that's the deeper reason why they didn't want to go into the land. They're, of course, they concocted the idea that they're afraid of the giants, and that it's not that was more of a. It's like a person comes up with all kinds of reasons why you don't want to go somewhere, and you would stop believing those reasons, but that's not what it really is. There's something deeper that you're not interested, or you don't want to go for some, you know, and you find, and then when you find excuses, doesn't mean that you're just giving an excuse. Sometimes you believe that excuse, but the reason you're finding these excuses is because you really don't want it from a deeper place. They didn't want to go into the land of Israel. They just didn't want. They were having such a good time in the desert. They got blast, spiritual blast. They didn't want to go into the land of Israel because it would mean that this great spiritual oasis that they experienced of so much Torah and so much light would be taken away from them. They're going to have to work the land. Now that's particularly offensive to God's attribute of kingship, because God's kingship is built through actions, not through thought and not through meditations. Through meditations and that, you build a connection to the other aspects of God. But kingship is built through physical mitzvot. It's related to an idea that we spoke many times, that the 10 Sefirot, Chachma being the highest, Chachma is manifest in the world of Atzilut, Bina is manifest in the world of Bria, the world of creation. The emotions of God are manifest in the world of Yetzirah, and Malchut, kingship, is the power of the world of Asiya, the world of action, the world of completion. That's why when a generation rejects physical mitzvot, and they say we're not interested in it, we want to rather hover above in a more spiritual level, they particularly rejected God as king. The kingship element was rejected, and therefore it is in the Aleph Daled Nun Yud that they needed to do the biggest repair. Let's read it again. And the sin and the blemish of the spies. They didn't want physical mitzvahs. That's in kingship. That's why this is where the repair needs to be made. The injury is in this level. We might say it's a foot injury, because we learned now in Ayin Beis that Malchut is the feet. Malchut is the mouth, but Malchut is also the feet. So it was like an injury, and so you need to bandage the foot. So Moshe needed to tend to God's legs to the level of Malchut, and over there do a repair. That's why he says, "Va'ato Yigdal na Koach Aleph Daled Nun Yud," because that's Aleph Daled Nun Yud is the name of God relating to kingship. And through increasing the Koach of Adna, Nesakin v'Nismal Apagam, this corrects and this fills the blemish. Chapter 3. To understand this idea better, this is so beautiful. We'll understand this better by first understanding the meaning of the verse. Va'ato Yigdal na Koach. He doesn't say Va'ato Yigdal, now let it increase. Ado Aleph Daled Nun Yud. He emphasizes Koach Adna, the power of Aleph Daled Nun Yud should increase. If he just wants to do a repair in Malchut, should say Va'ata Yigdal na, let it become great. Adna. Aleph Daled Nun Yud, meaning the master should become great. He says the power of Adna. That means if Adna is Malchut, the Koach of Adna is the power of Malchus above Malchut. Knows the Shoresh of Malchus. There is Malchus itself, and there is the Shoresh of Malchus, where Malchus comes from in the higher attributes. Like we know that Malchus is rooted in Chachma. As we say many times, we learn in Zohar, Abba Yasad Brata. The father is the one who's the foundation of the daughter. Chachma is the Chachma, which is the first of the 10 attributes, is produces Malchut, which is the 10th. The first and the lowest are connected to each other. So Koach Adna is the power of Chachma. Adna's Malchus. So, as I'm going to explain, now there's two interpretations of what it is meant when it says the Yigdal na Koach. The Bekama Drusha, the Rebbe says, the Rebbe's style is that the Rebbe gathers. This is a very, very important maimah for the Rebbe himself, because the Rebbe is the manifestation of Malchut. He's the seventh of all the 7 Rebbes. So he's the Malchut, the 7th is Malchut. And that's why you find that Malchut doesn't have any of its own light. It takes all the lights from the higher, but it actualizes them. Like the Rebbe actualizes all the powers from the higher tzaddikim, the Rebbe actualizes it in the literal sense in the world. So one of the things you see is that he, in his discourses particularly, he takes from everybody and analyzes it, and like brings in all the various different things. It's like all the streams flow to the ocean. The Rebbe is like the ocean, the Malchut. They all flow in. So he doesn't add. He says, in some discourses, the Bekamed Rushim, that in some discourses of who? Of his predecessors, of the earlier Rebbes, of Chabad. Mevurd is explained, the Pirish Yigdal Koach Adna, what does it mean it should increase the power of Adna? Hu sheyumshach be'adna hakoach shelo. Interesting interpretation. Read it like this. Va'ata, and now, Yigdal should increase. Who should increase? Adna shall increase. How will Aleph Daled Nun, how will the Malchut inflate? How will the Malchus expand? When you draw down in Malchut, Koach Adna. The Koach of Aleph, usually the Koach of Adna, which is the Koach of Malchut, is not felt in Malchut. It's the source of Malchut, but it's the source way up there. It's not felt in Malchut. So kingship does not know its own source. Now that we need to do a repair in Malchus, we have to download the source of Malchut into Malchus. Malchus has to get a preview of her own, a taste of her own source. And when that will do it, it will embellish and repair the Malchut. Rejuvenate Malchus, if we might say. The Pirish Yigdal Koach Adnu sheyimshach ba'adna hakoach shelo. That it should draw down into Aleph Daled Nun Yud her koach. What is that? Hashorish, the root. Umakar the Adna, and the source of Adna. And when you will, he'll soon say what that source is. And that's going to make Malchus expand. Malchus is going to expand when she's going to experience her own source. That's one pirush. Pirush the Yigdal Koach Adna, but in different Maimarim, he's going to say in a moment, in various other discourses, it follows the more simple meaning of the words. In the simple meaning of the word, what's increasing? You're not increasing Adna. You're not increasing. The reason I'm saying Adna, just for everybody to know, is I'm not allowed to say God's name. So I could say it Aleph, Ado, da 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 blah la 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 Nai, and I don't want to say that because I'm not allowed to say that. So I'm saying Adna is just a way of saying it. So it sounds a little funny, but I'm just giving you a reason why I'm doing that. Okay, so that's the way. So Adna is not the right way of saying it. It's Ado, whatever. But the words Va'ata Yigdal Koach Adna is what's becoming great. Is Adna becoming great or increasing, or is Koach Adna increasing? What's the difference? When you're expanding the Aleph Daled Nun Yud, are you expanding Aleph Daled Nun Yud, or are you expanding the source of Aleph Daled Nun Yud, the Koach of Adna? So the interpretation we learned till now meaning just a moment ago, what did we learn? What is being expanded is Malchut. Malchus is Adna. That's Malchus. The name of God associated with Malchus is Adna. How do you increase and how do you empower Adna? How do you do that? By bringing down Koach. By revealing the Koach Adna. In Adna, that strengthens Malchus. Makes it bigger, stronger, so to speak. But that's not the simple interpretation. The simple interpretation. The Ato Yigdal, now it should become great. Koach Adna should become great. That the Koach of Adna has to become great. By what? How do you increase Koach Adna? By bringing into the Koach Adna something that's totally beyond Adna, even beyond the Koach of Adna. In other words, are we just downloading the source of Adna into Malchus? Or are we even drawing something down that's beyond the source? Higher even than the source. And the difference is simple. I'm going to use Kabbalistic terms to make it much easier for those who follow Kabbalah a little. Are you drawing Chachma into Malchus or are you drawing Kesser into Malchus? If you're drawing Chachma into Malchus, it means you're revealing the Koach, Chachma, the power of Chachma. It's the first of the 10 Sefirot, which is the power of Adna, which we'll soon see later. We're going to unpack this all. First, we're laying out the formula here. The power of Adna is Chachma. So when you reveal Chachma in Malchut, in Kingship, what you're doing is you're revealing the shoresh of Malchus in Malchus. So you're not increasing the Koach of Adna, you're increasing Adna by bringing the Koach down into Adna. Another interpretation is higher than that. The Ato Yigdal, no, you're causing an expansion, not in Malchus, but in the Koach of Malchus. What's the Koach of Malchus? Koach Adna. What's the Koach of Chachma? You're expanding even Chachma. How are you expanding Chachma? By bringing something that's even beyond the Koach of Adna. What's that? That's Kesser. Which Kesser is truly infinite. When that comes down into Chachma, you're expanding Chachma, which is the Koach of Adna. And when you're expanding the Koach of Adna, obviously, it's going to expand Malchus in a much bigger way. Or, even deeper, the Koach of Adna, which is Chachma, after it was now increased and after it was now expanded by Kesser coming down into Chachma, Chachma, together with the Kesser light, now they both download into Malchus. And that creates a whole new refreshing, refurbishing of Malchus, rejuvenating of Malchus, healing and complete renewal of Malchus, and there's no blemishes there anymore. So these are the two interpretations. Both of them are valid interpretations. Both of them are discussed, the Rebbe says, in different Maimarim, in different discourses by his predecessors, by the previous Rebbes. You'll find in one Maimar it says this Pirush, and in another Maimar, and the Rebbe is now bringing it all together. He's explaining the differences. What is accomplished with one? What is accomplished with the other? Why do you need both? Let's see. So it is explained in many discourses. There should be a greatness. Gam bekoach adna. There should be an increasement also in the koach. With this we'll understand more. Now we'll understand even better, according to the second interpretation. We'll understand the connection of Yigdal no Koach Adna to Hashem Erech HaPayim. Because he says, Moshe says, V'ato Yigdal no Koach Hashem. And then he says, Hashem Erech HaPayim. I will understand. Because how do you, according to the second interpretation, that you're increasing Koach Adna? How are you increasing Koach Adna? By going higher than Chachma, going to Kesser. Well, that's Hashem Erech HaPayim. Hashem Erech HaPayim, the 13 attributes of mercy, are the energies of Kesser. If you learn Va'ata Yigdal no Koach Adna, the first interpretation, you're not expanding Chachma, you're expanding Malchus. How are you expanding Malchus? By drawing Chachma down to Malchus. So then, what's the continuation? Hashem Erech HaPayim, that's Kesser. Well, how does Kesser fall in it? So you have to say that in addition to this, it should also be that. It's like what it says in this pasuk. First is one verse that says that you have to repeat. We have to do first 8 to Malchus. What do we do first 8 to Malchus? Let's first bring down the source of Malchus into Malchus. That's Va'ata Yigdal na Koach Adna. Download Chachma into Malchus. Moshe Rabbeinu says, once we're at it, let's bring down more. Let's go higher. Let's bring the lights of Kesser as well. But then it's two different things. But according to the second interpretation, that Va'ata Yigdal na Koach Adna means you're not increasing Adna, you're increasing Koach Adna, which is Chachma. How do you increase Chachma? By bringing in the lights of Kesser. Well, that's exactly Kasha Dibarto Lemar, Hashem Erech Apayim. That's the revelation of the 13 attributes of mercy that are drawn from above the entire system into the system. So that's why he says, according to the second interpretation, it fits better. Again, Valpize Yuvin Yoiser will understand even more. He adds in the parentheses the word Yoser. We're soon going to take a look at footnote 17 that he's going to make an interesting comment. Valpize Yuvin Yoiser, but we'll get to that in a minute. Hashaych is the Yigdal no Koach Adna Lashem Erech Apayim. The connection of Yigdal no Koach Adna Lashem Erech Apayim. Yud Gimel Midas Arachmim Shalamayla Mishtal Shalos, the 13 attributes of mercy. Ki bechdei sheti Yagdolo beKoach Adna. How do you make not just Adna, but even the Koach of Adna? Hashayrish Makar the Adna. How do you increase that power? Where they amshacha, by bringing down light, by causing a download, by bringing down light, from a level that's above the entire progressive order, which is the light of Kesser, as we'll see in the next piece. Even beyond and above the source of Ishtal Shalut. The source of Ishtal Shalut is Chachma. Chachma is also above. But Chachma at least is considered a source for everything that will evolve. Kesser is not even a source. Kesser is utterly removed. And so over here, how do you expand the Koach of Aleph Dalet Nun Yud? By bringing down something that's beyond the Koach, the source of Ishtal Shalut, of the world, something that's infinite, it's beyond. Again, at this point, the Rebbe didn't label it yet with Sfirot. He's just talking in Hasidic terminology. He's not talking in Kabbalistic terminology yet. But in the next piece, he's going to ascribe names to these levels, as we'll see in a minute. Now, in Arith 17, he says, so in Arith 17, he wants to explain why even in the first interpretation, that the Ato Yigdal no Koach Adna means not that you're expanding Chachma, the power of Adna. But the first interpretation was you're increasing Adna itself. You're increasing Malchus. By what? By bringing down Koach. So, is there any relationship to Hashem Erech Apayim, to the 13 attributes of mercy? Would seem like there's no relationship, because Koach Adna is not the 13 attributes of mercy. Koach Adna is Chachma, and the 13 attributes of mercy are infinitely higher, the level of Keter. So it's two different things. But the Rebbe says no. Lakuti Torah, he connects the two. Why? Because the Rebbe says even Koach Adna is also above the world, above the progression. Because Chachma is also still considered. The real structure of creation starts in Bina. Bina is already fixed and set. Bina has design. Chachma is still a very, very, very liquidy energy. It's unformed. It's undesigned yet. So in general, Chachma it's like in Chachma is hinted to in the Yud. The Yud is a point. From a point, you can go in any direction. A point doesn't have yet much of a shape. Bina is already structured. It's already a hay. You already designed something. It's already fixed. Chachma is still above. So in general, even Chachma is called an energy that's above Ishtal Shalut. And that's why it's related to Hashem Erech Apayim, which is also energies that are above. That will work. It will work even if Koach Adna means Chachma. Yigdal no Koach Adna means Chachma. However, according to the second interpretation, that Yigdal no Koach Adna means that even the Koach of Adna should become great, which means we're going beyond the Koach of Adna to bring the lights of Kesser down. Oh, then it will fit really well. It will like click right in with the next verse that says Hashem Erech Apayim, which are the lights of Kesser, because they're both the same content. Okay. The Inyano, So now he's going to give it some Kabbalistic labeling. Whatever we've learned, it's going to be easy now because I've already used the Kabbalah in the last piece. So now we'll align it all. The Inyanu and the idea is like this: the Shem Adna hu b'Malchus. The name Aleph Daled Nun Yud we've already learned earlier is in Malchus Kana. The Koach Adna. What's the power of Adna? Hashorish u'makor the Malchut, the root and the source of Malchus, hu b'Chachma. That's in Chachma. Like we know, the Abba Yasid Brata. There is an expression in Zohar, father, which we know is Chachma. Chachma is called father and Bina is called mother. So we know we say about Chachma, which is father, he is the foundation of the daughter. It has to do with the idea that we spoke many times, that in order to have a child, there has to be a father and a mother, a male and female. Together they create the child. But in the children, there can be two children. It can be a boy and a girl. The two genders, boy and girl. So the interesting idea is, Kabbalistically, and it has to, and on all levels, it is that way, that there is a certain crossover between the genders. The male power is what mainly produces the female. And the female power is what mainly produces male. That means that between father and mother, male and female, the mom is more responsible if it's a boy. And the father is more responsible if it's a girl. The more dominance of male energy will create a girl. More dominance of female energy will create a boy. And that's why also in their lives, generally, it's not always the rule that way, but generally, fathers love their daughters. There's a special, unique connection between father and mothers have a special connection to their son. That's just, there's a certain crossover. So spiritually, in the origins of the divine energy, it works the same way. That Chachma, which is male, father, creates the daughter, which is Malchut. Abba Yasid Brat. So that's why, now that explains why Chachma is called Koach Adna. And soon, the Yuvan Zeh, and he actually gives a very real example. We know many times that Malchut is the power of speech. And as we discussed in many classes recently, the power of letters of speech originate in the pre-intelligence. For those who have been listening to the Lakus channel, we've been talking about this. And letters words are not, you don't pronounce words and letters with a conscious, deliberate movement of your lips. And you're not intellectually designing those letters. The letters come from a power in the soul that precedes understanding. So Kabbalistically it explains that the letters are rooted in the power of Chachma, which Chachma is higher than intelligence. Even though Chachma is the seed of intelligence. By the way, that Chachma is an intellectual faculty, by the way, it's interesting. That Chachma is an understanding, it's a power of understanding, is the tail end of Chachma. The lower part of Chachma is the seed, is the flash. Higher parts of Chachma is like vision. It's higher than an intellectual idea. It's like seeing something in your mind. And then there is even higher than that, even higher than sight. Chachma is really above intellect. So, and that's where the words are produced. That's where letters come from. That's the meaning that Abba Yasid Brata. Brata is Malchus. Malchus is speech, the ability to communicate. And the source of the letters of speech are rooted in the Chachma. From the letters of speech. The Malchus Beklalu Dibur. Malchus in general is speech. Shesharsham, their root, where the letters come from, Hulamaylam or Haseichel Oyamida. Now, usually what you're speaking, if the speaking has any value, is that a person is speaking and they're using their speech to convey their content. What's the content? They're using their speech to convey an idea or an emotion. So you're communicating a concept, an emotion. But the letters, very cool thing. And generally, and what are the words? The words are just like packaging. You have to package an emotion into something, so you put it into words. You have to package the idea into something so that you can transmit it to someone else. So you pour it into words, into letters. So the letters seem to be only serving the idea that the letters seem to be just external vessels that hold the energy of intellect and emotions. But the beautiful thing that we learn in Chassidus is that the root of those containers, the letters are containers. The root of the containers is higher than the energy that's inside of them. Even prior to the idea that when you're having a flash of an idea, even prior to the idea are the words that are gonna end up serving the idea. All they are is ABC. They're just letters of the Aleph Beit. But yet these letters come from a very, very high origin. I'm not going to go into it now. We gave a lot of classes recently on this idea that a person doesn't have any deliberate thought when they pronounce letters. You don't consciously decide to close your lips and open your tongue and lock your tongue, throw your tongue upward and throw it down. And no one has to do that, thank God. It happens like just automatically. Because the letters are from a place beyond conscious intelligence. They're rooted deeper than the intellect, the emotion. That's in that. Now, by the way, Or HaSeichel usually is referring to the light of Seichel as the light of Bina. That's the point. The words, they come from Chachma. The light of the idea, the concept, is more of a Bina experience. Or the emotions. Now, the proof to that, that letters come from a mysterious place, higher than the concept. This is what we learned also in the Lakus channel, literally this idea. This that sometimes there is the same idea, same concept that two people are saying, and each one of them says the idea in different words. Same teaching are given over. You can read the same teaching on the parsha, read it in 3 different publications, and unless they're cut and paste, but if they're not cut and paste, you'll see the same concept, the same teaching, the same Dvar Torah, and everybody says it in different words. And that's because the Bina, which is the idea, is one idea. So it should have one way of it expressing itself. Why is it coming in such variations? Because the letters have nothing to do with the idea. The letters come from a place higher than the idea itself. And every person, and when people are choosing those letters, they're not choosing it consciously, but what's coming out of them has to do with their nature of their soul that's deeper than any of their consciousness. And that's why some people will say it like this and some people will say it like that. So I said, are we learning I came out really beautiful in the Lakus channel when I was teaching it that when you see rabbis or people saying different teachings and different words, it says the words they choose that they're using says more about them than it says about. It's like there's something that they're conveying about themselves, higher than their conscious selves, that come out in the words that they're using. The root of letters is from Chachma. And that's called Seichel HaNelam. Chachma is called the hidden intelligence, the kadmus haseichel, and the pre-intellect. And it was not from the not from the revealed ideas, from the revealed cognition, from a place, from a superconscious level, if you might say. Shebenefesh, that's in the soul. Shalamayla maseichel agolui, that's higher than the revealed intelligence. Now we're going to see something really cool. This will also explain why when you speak something, it brings clarity into what you are understanding. When you study something and you only think it, you usually don't have such clarity. But then when you speak it, it becomes so clear to the teacher when they speak it. Much clearer than when they learned it to themselves. Because just articulating, why? Because they're putting it into letters. They're putting it into words. Since those letters are coming from such a high place, it's enriching their intelligence by putting it into words. This is the reason through this that you bring something down in speech. It adds more in the idea that you're learning. More than what it was in thought. And ask anybody who gives classes on any subject. You do yourself the biggest favor by giving a class. Because you understand the subject matter so much better by teaching it. Because the very fact that you're forced to verbalize it and to articulate it, mysteriously putting something into words pumps the depth of the idea out into your own mind. Suddenly your mind is showered with such deep understanding that you don't have by just the idea. In other words, when the idea emerges without words, the idea is kind of mediocre. But once you're putting those letters into words, especially when you have to speak it, you're intensifying the flow of intellectual energy. Why? Because you're opening up the place, the bank, from where all the ideas come from. You're opening the door wider because you're letting the letters come out. And when the letters come out, along with them comes deeper energy of intelligence. So suddenly the intellect becomes so much richer and brighter when the words come out. Because words are coming from a very deep place in the soul. Because through speak, because the speech opens up the chachma, which is the root from where the seichel comes from. It's almost, I would say, like this. The door of chachma. Let's put it this way. All creativity comes from chachma. Chachma is the creative mind. But let's look at it this way. The door of chachma is closed. When you're trying to conceive an idea, you're banging on the door of chachma, and the chachma door is like, and then it bends a little bit, and a little light from beyond the chachma, from the hidden place of chachma, a little bit of that powerful potential in the soul, like gets a chance to like come out, leaks out, and that's the power of your idea. You got a little squirt of the energy of chachma that just squirted, which you managed to get by the door being pried open a tiny bit. But when you're teaching it, what you're doing is, because you're now opening up, because you have to let the letters out, the words come from you, you're prying that door open even more. And suddenly, not only are you getting letters, but along with the letters, you're getting the power of chachma, which is the source from where the idea comes from. And that's why right now the idea becomes so much more enriched. Now you understand it so much better. That's the meaning of the first interpretation. That how do you increase malchut? Malchus is speech. V'ato Yigdal no Koach. You bring down the lights of chachma into malchus. Let's see it inside. Let's learn another chapter here, even though my eyes are closing on me. Now, this that the root of speech is in Chachma. It's Gewalt. Is not only to speech itself, he's doing an amazing analysis on the above mentioned idea that we just mentioned. That when you take an idea and you speak it, you verbalize, you articulate an idea, you increase the flow of energy and enriching the idea. We said the reason is it has something to do with the letters. The letters themselves do the magic. Because the words, the letters are coming from you have to go to your letter bank, basically. In order to speak, you have to go to your bank from where your words are coming from. You have to open up that window, and that window is in the pre-intelligence, and that's why once you open that window, it enriches the intelligence. So then it would be blamed, or then you can attribute this enrichment to the letters themselves. But now he's going to say there's something else. For one moment, let's put the letters on the side. There's another reason why when you talk, it becomes enriched. But not because of the letters, but because of, watch this. In order to speak something, the only way you can speak a concept is by slicing it into pieces. Because the only way you can convey an idea is through speech. Speech is made up of words and of sentences. And every sentence and every word carries a little nugget or a little piece of the idea. So any concept, when it's in your own head, it is not sliced. It's one chunk. It's one idea. But when you're going to speak it, you have to put it into sentences. So you have to chop it up into pieces. How can you take a singular idea and divide it? That ability to divide an idea into like segments, into pieces, that comes from a higher place than the idea itself. So let's forget about a moment where let's say the letters are not coming from such a high place. Let's say the letter is the bank of the letters would be literally in your mouth, right over here, not deep in your soul, let's say. But the mere fact that you need to take your intelligence now and pour a concept into a bunch of words, that itself is forcing you deeper into the concept in order to be able to do that. Just because it needs to be sliced. And for that reason itself, that itself is increasing the richness of the concept. Now, in addition to that, there is also the idea that the letters for themselves are also coming from that very deep place. So it's two things. It's the letters that are coming from a higher place, which enrich the idea. Also, the very fact that the intellect, or the emotions, by the way, it's also the same thing. We spoke about ideas. An emotion is also that way. An emotion is generally, it's one feeling. Now that someone asks you to please express your feelings, it's very hard to do that. To express my feeling is my feeling. So you express it. So you go to a therapist who tries to help you put it into words. So when you're putting it into words, what are you doing? You're chopping up the emotion. We think that that's like kind of weakening it, but that's not actually weakening it. It's actually bringing out a certain depth of it, which only through that depth that you're able to chop it up. He's going to explain it inside, we'll see better. So that's in addition. So what's the difference between that and the speech itself? The question is like this. Is the enrichment due to the vessels, or is the enrichment due to the fact that you need to, that's not the vessels, but the ability to pack the vessels? Is the enrichment related to that you have the ability to pack the vessels, which is a talent on its own, which brings forth a deeper power of the idea or the emotion? Or is it have to do with the packaging itself? Would you both, and the Rebbe is not saying one over the other, he says both are there. Let's read it inside. This that we say that the root of speech is in Chachma. It's not only to the speech itself, but also the intellect and the emotions. That becomes enclosed in speech. They as well. Because through the intellect and the emotions becoming clothed in speech, they become divided into many different parts. Why? When one is speaking words of love, the emotion is just a singular emotion. And when you need to convey that emotion into words, it's getting divided into many words. That in every word, if I'm saying a sentence of love, in every word of that sentence, obviously it's containing some of that emotion. And the same as if when a person is speaking some concept, intellectual idea. The concept is one idea. But when you're bringing it down into speech, it becomes divided into many parts. This itself, that you can take a singular idea and you're able to divide it, even though on their own, the idea was, when you conceived the idea, you conceived it as one point. When you conceived or experienced the love, you're experiencing it just as one singular experience. In order for that to happen, the concept needs to rise to the pre-concept. It's based on the idea. It's based on an interesting idea. That sometimes limiting something, in order to limit something, you need to have a more unlimited power. Juneteenth? Wow. The energy, as the energy is on its own, comes in a certain tzir, or comes in a certain way. What's its state of existence? Is that it doesn't have parts. In order to bring out parts in it, in order to find components, to be able to like, which would mean in order to be able to have such power over the concept, to be able to crumb it into crumbs, you need to have more. You need to have more, a greater. You have to be deeper in it. That gives you the wiggle room to be able to break it. That's why you find. That's where you find that people that understand something very, very, very well, they're the ones who are able to. They're the ones who are able to, first of all, speak about it. A lot of times the people who understand stuff and they can't stand ideas and understand things and they're not able to sentence it. It's only when you understand something really, really well, you have the ability to, because it requires, the words of the Alter Rebbe, the words of the Rebbe, which he's bringing from the Alter Rebbe, the Koach HaMechalek Es HaSeichel, the power that cuts the seichel, that cuts the idea or cuts the emotion, that power is deeper than the emotion itself, or is rooted in the very, very source from where the emotion is coming from, or very source from where the intellect is coming from, or the concept is coming from. So what he added over here in this chapter is, there's a general concept that the root, that malchut, which is speech, which is the power of kingship, is rooted. What's the source of malchus? The source of malchus is chachma. Which chachma over here, again, let's understand something. Chachma over here, wisdom, does not mean wisdom as we usually interpret it, as the first of the Chabad, chachma bin adas, as like the beginning of intelligence, really, or as like the point, and then from the point you have the bina. But chachma over here means more like the power, the creative power from where the idea comes from, the pre-point, the unknowable source from where. Or like sometimes it's explained in Chassidus, it's called Chachma Stuma, the concealed Chachma. That's where letters come from. That's where words come from. And that's why we learned earlier, again, that's why we learned earlier that when you speak an idea, you end up understanding the idea much better. Just by putting it into words, because words are drawing from the pre-intellect. Now we added that, okay, speech, letters are very, very high, but then even if we're looking just at the chachma itself, not at the speech, at the letters, you see, if you're blaming it on the letters, if the reason why you're enriching your intellect and your emotions because you're saying words, it's more like a magical effect. Why a magical effect? Because letters is a word for itself. It's letters. The letters are only the containers. How does the container affect the concept? The container affecting the concept is like by some kind of a mystical type of an effect. Explained it earlier, because the words come from the pre-intellect. When you open up the door for the letters, you're already gushing forth more light of intelligence. But it's more of a distant connection, because after everything is said and done, the letters are letters, and the words are the word, and the intellect and the concept is the concept. But based on the explanation that he just gave, it actually makes more sense, because there's another component over here. The component is, in order to speak something, you have to have more control over the idea itself. So when you're trying to say something, why? Because the concept is one concept. The emotion is one emotion. When you're going to put something into words, what you're really doing is you're splintering the concept. You're breaking it into pieces. You're breaking the emotion into pieces. In order to have that, you have to have more control over it. To have more control over it, you have to understand it from a much deeper place. The better you know something, the deeper you know it, the more flexibility you have with it. So therefore, now we'll understand it's not such a magic that when the speech comes in, you understand it better. You understand it. The enrichment of the idea now makes sense because it's not because of the magic of the letters. It's because to be able to package it into words, you're actually thinking deeper. You're pulling out a deeper aspect. You're opening up the concept to the source of the concept. And then the concept is not so fixed that it has to be just one idea. It's one, but rather you have more flexibility to play with it a little bit and to break it and to pack it into many sentences. What this gives us is a more rational explanation why through speech, because now we're not focusing on the mystery of where letters come from. That's a beautiful idea. But now we're focusing on simply a logic. The concept itself, you're stretching and you're deepening the concept just by to enable yourself to be able to put it into words, forces you automatically to squeeze the concept and get to its guts, get to its inside of the concept. Then you're able to put it into words. That's what he added in chapter 5. And this is what he says now in chapter 6. Now we'll understand even more. The reason for this, through this, that you bring the concept into speech. It enriches your understanding of the concept, like it was earlier. Because the power that chops up a concept, into letters of speech, it is rooted in the pre-intelligence. Again, the concept itself would not allow itself to be chopped up. The power to chop it comes from the pre-power of this idea. Hamakar de Seichel Agoli, the source from where the revealed intelligence is. And this will also explain another very interesting phenomenon. At times, this is so beautiful. See, before we spoke that when you learn something and when you verbalize and articulate something, you understand it better. Now he's going to add a dimension to it. It's not just that you understand it better, but a lot of times it actually clarifies the entire thing. What do we mean by that? He says that when you learn something, studying something, and you're just thinking about it, you're not talking it, you're just thinking about it. And you have questions, you have contradictions. For example, you're studying Torah. You're studying a Hasidic discourse. A lot of times when you learn something in one discourse, you have a question. How does this fit with that idea that I learned last week? It's in a different thing. This seems to be like kind of completely contradict many of the other things I've learned. So it starts creating, and you start being bothered, like it can't be true or whatever. Like I have a question. But then you know it's true. It says so in the book. And the book it's a holy book of Torah. It's truth. And then when you speak it, even if you're not teaching it, But a lot of times it works that way. That when you pick up, I have that a lot of times. You open up a book, you start reading, it doesn't make any sense. Or even if it makes sense, like you're reading it just with your eyes. So what do? You sit down and you start reading it slowly. And you say it. You're actually saying the passage of the Talmud. You're saying the Tosfos. You're saying the Maimer Chasidus. And suddenly, just by saying it, the questions that you've had just kind of dissipate. Not bothering you anymore. You say, yeah. And what did you do? You just said it. Now what? You thought it. Thought precedes speech. Why is it that by saying the words, by verbalizing it loudly, suddenly it's becoming the questions that you have and the contradictions just suddenly evaporate? How does that work? And everybody has that experience. It's not just people who study a lot have it quite a lot, but you can see the moment you speak something, and that's what you'll find a lot of times in yeshiva, you'll see, remember, like you'll see someone who's studying, and you see that, and then they start walking, pacing, and they say it to themselves, back and forth. They say it, they'll say it again, and they're verbalizing, saying it. Why are they saying it? Don't you think it? What if to be a crazy person walking around talking to yourself? Just think it. The answer is no. Saying it is going to creates the clarity. Why is that? So the Rebi says an interesting thing. If we're dealing with true concepts, now you don't know if something is true if it's just plain and is written in someone's book. It could be baloney. But if it's a Torah book, Torah is truth. And especially if it's a reliable book of Torah, it's the Torah of you're learning something from the Alter Rebbe. You know what the Alter Rebbe is saying is truth. Whether I understand it or not, you know that the Alter Rebbe said the truth. You know that Tzemach Tzedek said the truth. You know the Baal Shem Tov was saying the truth. There's no question in your mind that what they're saying is the deepest truth. Sometimes it's just not. So where's the problem? Now you understand it. Let's say you understand. Something you read it, you don't understand anything. Let's say you read it, you understand it. But then you have a question. The Rebbe says like this, where's the question? The idea is a true idea. The question is not really in the idea. The idea is pure. If it's truth, it has to fit with everything else. It's true. With everything else, that's true. If it's truth, then it fits with everything else. That's true. So all the other Torah that you learned, which you know is true and you conceived as true, and let's say you really understood it, yeah. But why is this a jar? It's not fitting well. Is the problem in the idea or the problem in yourself? The problem is in yourself. I'm not understanding it well. Why? Because initially when you studied and you learned to just in your thought, you just drew forth the externality of the concept. You didn't really get to the pneumius of it. You're learning it for the first time or even the second time, but you're not saying it, you're just thinking it. It's possible that you've just drawn down a very superficial revelation of that idea, and that's what you're understanding. And that, because of your superficial understanding of it, for that reason you have questions. But when you speak it, now over here, we're not talking about the quality of speech because of the letters. Let's leave that out. The mere fact that you're now chopping it, you're putting it into the chopper. So you're forcing yourself to take an idea and to split it, which means you're activating a deeper part of your mind that is able to take, you're going deeper into the idea to be able to speak it. So you're drawing the idea down from a deeper place. Once you pull it out from a more deeper place, over there's no questions because it's the truth. Suddenly the questions aren't there anymore. You're digging much deeper by putting it into words. Let's read it inside. At times when you learn something in thought, and you have questions. Strong ones. You don't have any answers. And then when you speak it in speech, suddenly you say, you feel, it's not a question from that, because that's not a question, because that's talking about this, and that's completely not a question. And the contradictions, they fall away. It's not always. Not every time you're going to put something in speech, it happens. But many times we all have people that are who are studious and learn and like to learn things will attest to this. that by speaking out something, you gain a lot of clarity in it. Why? Intellect as it is from its source, whose seichel butter is a very clean, pure, true idea. Beli sig upsilas. It doesn't have any sediments in it. It doesn't have any imperfections. But that's only if you're catching the concept in its source. But if you're just superficially grabbing the concept can be mixed in with straw, like a grain that might have some pieces of straw in it. In other words, you can have some misconceived ideas that you've put in that is not the emes. The general idea could be true, but there are some pieces there that don't belong there. And that's because you're grasping a very external understanding of it. So how do you increase to get to the internal element of it? You talk. Why? Because you're forcing the idea into the packaging. And when you're forcing the idea into packaging, you have to unlimit the idea. So or else it doesn't get packaged, meaning it doesn't get split into pieces. The splitting of it into pieces is actually drawing forth a deeper, a more inner part of the concept. And once that's revealed, there is no questions. When you bring the idea into speech, which this is forcing the idea to come out as it is in its source. Because without revealing the idea in the source, you would not be able to chop it up. Nasa etzloi butter becomes so clear, in a manner that there is no question. And there isn't any contradiction. It's all clear. Now, he's going to explain in the next piece that there is a way there is a purification of the mind. There is a enrichment. Rather, let's look this way. There's an enrichment to the intellect that is even more powerful than speech. And what's the enrichment to intellect that's even more powerful than speech? Is the impact on desire over intellect, on the intellect. Which has to do with the idea that we know that when a person is learning something that they very, very much enjoy and they like learning, then the enrichment of what they're learning is going to be tremendous. Just because they like learning it. If you're coming into a class and you're not interested that much, you're learning because, you have to show up, whatever, because they're taking attendance, like in school. You have to show up to certain classes because you need you need to take the, what's it called? You need to the school, in order to get your degree, requires you to have been by so many and so many classes. So you have to take this class. But you have zero interest in this whole subject matter. So you're sitting there. It's not like you're not paying attention. You're paying attention, but you're paying attention just without any desire. Usually those types of learning, your understanding and grasp of the subject is going to be very limited. Even if you're listening and you have a pretty good head. But if you don't have any interest in it, so your mind is like an autopilot. Your mind is working, but there's no desire there. There's no... When you learn, that's why the sages tell you, very interesting thing. Sages say that whenever you're studying, you should try to study a subject that speaks to you, that your heart desires. In Torah, Torah has so many different parts to it. So in Torah itself, learn parts of Torah that your heart desires, that your heart. Why? Because then you'll be much more successful in your learning. You'll understand it much better. Because that means that will, and especially if it's not just will, but also pleasurable will. That a will that has pleasure in it. You have a pleasure in a certain part of Torah. And when you're learning it, what does it do? It increases you might say it increases the brain cells, the I don't know what you would call it, the stimulation of the brain is much stronger when you have desire and an inner pleasure in what you're learning. What he's going to do in the next piece is he's going to analyze the impact of bringing ideas into speech and its enhancement of the intellect by doing that versus the enhancement that happens in the intelligence when you add the ingredient of desire. And he's going to show us that the effects of desire on the intellect is stronger and more impactful than the effects on speech. Speech has an impact, and all of this is going to lead to understanding the difference between drawing Kesser into Chachma, into Malchus, which is what Yigdal knows. He's going to explain the concept of Yigdal no Koach Adna. Remember, that's all going to be connected over here. Adna is speech, is Malchus. Koach Adna is Chachma. The refurbishing of the clarification that happens in the intellect when you're bringing the chachma down. How do you bring the chachma in? Through speech. Remember, let me explain it. The intellect itself, that's bina. It's understanding. Chachma is pre-intellect. When you want to clarify your bina, your understanding of a subject, by introducing speech, which is malchus, which is letters. Malchus is rooted in chachma. So by putting it into words, you're drawing chachma into bina, and that's enhancing the bina. It's bringing the purification into the bina. All the questions you've had, all the contradictions, everything could become clarified. That's one thing. That's the benefit of bringing chachma into bina. And how do you draw the chachma into the bina? More than what the bina is pulling automatically. Bina is always pulling on chachma. The bina, the understanding, is pulling on the chachma. But how do you increase the chachma energy in bina double, twice as much? Oh, you introduce speech. Number one, the letters themselves of speech come from chachma. Number two, the mere power that you chop a concept up, that you should be able to package it, that true is bringing in chachma energy, which is increasing the bina and therefore eliminating all the questions. But then there's something else, as we said earlier. Learning where your heart desires. Having a strong will when you're learning. So then you're not just bringing chachma energy into bina, you're bringing kesser. You're bringing ratzon. And the effects of that power on the bina, which means on the actual grasp of the subject matter, is way bigger than just the speech. Let's read a little bit further. I'm not going to finish the whole discourse tonight, because then we're going to connect it all back to Yigdal na Koach Adna, but let's see a little further. Which over here, chachma doesn't mean understanding. Chachma means what you're bringing in through speech. You're bringing in your pre-intellect, and you're pulling on that when you're speaking for two reasons, like we discussed earlier. Speech itself is rooted over there, the letters are rooted over there, and also the idea that in order to be able to splinter a concept up into pieces, it requires you to pull from the pre-intellect, and that's the reason for the enrichment. He says even that, when you're bringing down kadmos haseichel, which means the pre-intellect, liyoy shirish or makar haseichel, since although it's not yet the intellect, but it's the root of the intellect, it has already a certain existence. It's already in a state of somethingness. And meaning to say, just like your conceived idea that you've studied and learned is something, the root from where the idea comes from is also something. It's just a very subtle something. And it's where you don't feel it. See, the pre-intellect is still something. It's the power of intelligence. It's not the power of emotion. It's the power of intellect. So it's something. It's just instead something. I'm saying something again, but it's interesting. In the Chassidus, we realize something. When something is something, it's very stuck because it's only something. Hasidism is always into the idea that you're bringing in nothingness. When you're bringing nothingness, you free the something. It's always about getting out of the somethingness. Bina is yesh, is something. It's understanding. You understood a concept, you understood it this way. How do you wiggle the concept and get it richer? How do you shake it up and bring much more energy and much more light and therefore much more what would be the right word? Flexibility to the idea. You have to bring a more nothing level into the something. Chachma is called ayin, it's called nothingness. But even though Chachma is called ayin, it's the ayin belonging to the yesh. It's a nothingness that's already a source for something. And that's what he's saying over here. It too is a very subtle something. So although it will add flexibility to a more rigid something, but it too is still something. So the amount of flexibility is still limited. Kesser energy, which is will, desire is not something. What's desire? Why? Because desire is the pure soul. Desire is not a power in your soul. Desire is just your plain soul. What's desire? Desire is the soul itself turning in a certain direction. Intellect is a certain power the soul has. So intellect is something. Desire is nothing. What do we say nothing? It's just pure soul energy, higher than any definition. That's the reason why when you bring desire in to intellect, the flexibility that it does to the intellect, it opens it, it stretches it, it enables the intellect to do somersaults, to make far more broadness. It expands the mind in a so much more greater way because it's a non-defined energy. Therefore, it's more limitless. So speech is good because speech, at least, is taking when you conceive an idea, the moment it clicks in your head, it gets rigid. It gets certain, you understand it this way and it's kind of stuck. And therefore, when you have a question, it's like you can't unstuck it. You have a question and you get stuck in the muck and you can't move. It's like getting your truck stuck in the mud and you can't move anywhere. It's like black. And sometimes so you need what do you need? You need a little flexibility. You need a little something that can redesign the whole concept. How do you do that? You put it into speech. So speech brings in the pre-intellect, which loosens the rigidity of the concept. And once you loosen it, you can unstuck it. And you can see, hey, this question is not a question. That's not a question. That's why speech enriches. But speech is pulling from a place that's the source of something. So it's also not so free yet. Desire is still such a high level of soul. It's pure energy. It doesn't have any shape and form. That's why when you can bring desire into, you're bringing liberation to the idea. You're freeing it in such a powerful way And that's why the desire enhances the learning much more than even speech does. It's very interesting this discourse, how it's like literally teaching us how the mind can work and how the mind can open up and how things. Okay, let's see. Which is the pre-intellect. Since the source and the root of intellect, it too is in a state of somethingness. The just like intellect is something, it's not the soul. The root of the intellect is also something. It's pre-intellect, but it's pre-intellect. It's not pre this or pre this. It's something specific. And this is the quality of willpower on the seichel. Gam al kadmos seichel. The power of will, its enrichment that it's able to do to the intellect and its influence on it is far superior than the kadmos seichel can do to seichel. Kadmos seichel means the pre-intellect can affect the intellect in loosening it, in expanding it, and opening it up. Why? Will is not something. Will, all that it is the pure self, the pure undefined energy of the soul that is turning in this direction or that direction. It's not something. And that's why we find that will, the will can dominate and rule over all the powers. Because the powers are all defined powers. And if they are defined powers, they all have certain structure and limitation. The soul is free. The soul itself. The will is the ambassador of the soul. It's the spokesman of the soul. And therefore it can command, as you say in Yiddish, it can tweak and move and push and open and shut all the doors. It's the administrator over everything. Will. And therefore it can control also the intellect. Gamal koach hasech. And will can do such a job on the intellect that it can make the intellect do somersaults. In which say, when a person really desires to understand something in a certain way, you can force your mind to understand opposite than everybody else. It's not always good. It's a bad thing a lot of times because you can fool yourself into. But what I'm saying is that the will has such dominance over a person's mind that it can make a person think even completely the opposite of what they would have thought. Now, a lot of times it's actually a good thing because when the truth is not the way your intellect is kind of conceiving it, sometimes you have to have a will. Let's say you're in a situation where you're out of self-love or out of self-deception. You've created an entire mind view, a philosophy that's very unhealthy. And you suddenly come to a realization because you're messing up in life so badly. And you're always everybody's telling you that you're making a mistake, every single person, but you are so insistent that you're right. But after a long period of time, you get fed up with being right. And you say, you know what, my life is totally miserable because I'm obviously doing things that are wrong, even though I'm thinking I'm right. And you are ready to listen to someone else. Okay? Imagine that. You're ready to actually change course of life. Maybe things got so miserable that you crashed. And what do? But you have a problem because your mind sees things in a certain way, and that's the way you see it, and that's the way you think is truth. So here's the thing, if you can create enough willpower, enough frustration and desire that things have to change in your life, that you can come to a new teacher, a new master, and say, reshape my mind. And with that power of will, you can start thinking and create certain thinking patterns and change the way you even understand. Because will can change a person's entire intelligence, can change your entire worldview. Even God's will can change the way God sees the world. God had a certain vision in the world. It's so incredible. God had a certain vision in the world until the flood. You know what that vision was? He was super annoyed by humans. That's what he was. Everything humans did got under his skin. He basically, God's worldview was, I created you, I gave you everything, so how come you behave in such a rotten way? You're a spoiled brat. That's what God was feeling. That's the way his mind told him. And he said, and he felt that God was cynical. He said, man is just a corrupt being, and he's just going to corrupt himself more and more and more. And every day God was getting angrier at his creation. And his mind was justifying that anger. Then the flood happened, and he got in. And then God saw that his project is not going anywhere. God said, it's time to visit the therapist. I got to reconceive my entire perception of it. It's not, if I can, God also realized that if I continue thinking this way, we're not going anywhere. We're going to have, every few years, we're going to have another flood. So God kind of had a desire, listen to this, a desire to change the way he thinks. And guess what he did? What does he do? He starts reprogramming his head. He says, these humans that I created that have an evil inclination, they're born with an evil inclination. But precisely because of that, it's so amazing. I can't be angry at them. I can only try to look out and see when they're overcoming their things and find such enjoyment when there's little moments and they overcome their selfishness. And that's going to give me, and that is so precious. And then God looks at his creation and sees us messing up, and he's waiting for that moment that we triumph. And he says, wow. He literally flipped his mind over, and he's seeing the whole world differently. Why? Because he had a desire to change the way he's thinking. So this is the idea that desire, so that's the difference between speech. Speech, if you have a certain idea, it can increase it and enrich it and create it to be expansive. But will, because will is even a higher level of soul than pre-intellect, where speech reaches, will can completely, as I said earlier, can take the intelligence and make it make somersaults, completely switch the mind over. That's why will, Kamaimer Azal, like the sages say, watch this. He's going to bring the proof from Hashem that way, as we're going to see in a minute. A person should always study in a place where his heart desires. Because through this, that a person desires to study, it brings a whole new dimension to learning and understanding. You understand differently because you really want to understand. Since Ratzon is higher, even than the root of intellect, therefore, the effect, the enrichment, that happens in the intellect through desire, but not the root from where intelligence comes from. Speech taps that root, but they can't switch that root because that root is that root. Speech comes from there. In order to change even the root of intelligence, you have to go from a place that's above the root of intelligence. In other words, you have to have a supervisor that's higher than the root of intelligence. To fix intelligence, you can fix it and tweak it, or by finding the supervisor of intelligence. What's the supervisor of intelligence? The source of intelligence. But in order to tweak the source of intelligence, for that you have to go beyond intelligence completely. And that's the concept of Koach. There is the ability to fix Adna, but there's the ability of we'll see soon when we interpret it in the verses. Therefore, the addition that happens to the intellect through desire, who harbe yoser, is much more than what is added on through speech. 34. And here in 34 is where he says what I said earlier about God. You can see in God also that his desire changes the way his mind thinks. He brings the example. That basically what we're saying is speech only enhances the intellect. It can't transform the intellect. But will can even transform the mind. Leheyer, he says in footnote 34, Shal dibur, through speech, what speech does is it draws this very concept, it pulls out from a deeper place. It pulls the roots of it. It exposes the roots. That's what speech does. But through desire, it doesn't only draw forth the root of the idea, it changes the thinking. Like it is known the example, in the beginning it says that God was so angry and upset that man's thoughts are always wicked. That God is complaining. The human I created is wicked. All day long he's scheming bad stuff. I'm so angry at him, I can't tolerate him. That's what the verse says. That's what God says in the end of the first parsha, the end of the first Torah portion of Genesis. Therefore, I'm going to wipe man off the face of the earth. And then the next Torah portion, in the Torah portion of Noah, God uses the same reasoning, but he comes to a complete different conclusion. That means he's flipped his mind completely and his attitude towards the way he sees the human race. He says, man's heart is bad from such a young age, therefore I will never ever smite him again. Hold on, this was the same reasoning you said you're gonna wipe the man off because he's always scheming to do bad stuff. And now you're saying he's almost scheming to do bad stuff, I'm never gonna get him angry at him again. So what changed? God's desire changed. And who changed God's desire? Noah. He was the tzaddik, and he offered sacrifices, and he engaged God, and God, and because he engaged with God, he evoked God's desire, and God had a change of heart, which changed his mind, which made him see everything from a different perspective. So you see it switches. And that's the effects of will on intellect. And the reason is, therefore, we're going back inside, right after 34. The reason why speech brings enrichment is because speech is evoking the root of the idea. And since even the source of intellect is also something, or it has a little bit of an image already. What's the image? The image is that it's a source of intellect. So it has a certain image. That's why the enrichment that happens through drawing forth the source of intellect is all limited. Which isn't the case when we add when the intellect becomes enriched, not through speech, but through having a desire to learn. What happens then? Einoi meduda. The enrichment is not limited. It's a limitless enrichment. Why? Koach. It's obviously everything in our world is limited, but it's not that limited. It's because the effect of will is not just on the conceived idea, but also in the source from where ideas are created. Will has a power over the kochos, All kochos, even the seed of the kochos, will dominates the entire nefesh. All the powers of the nefesh, it dominates over them from their very quintessential source. Will has overriding power. Well, and similar to this, we'll understand above. Now, I just want to conclude this piece so that when we can lead, so we have a completed idea how this applies to the subject matter that we're talking about malchus and bringing a tikkun in malchus for sin. So literally the last paragraph. We'll understand. There's two ways to make the name Aleph Daled Nun Yud great. Hagdala ba'adna, one level of doing a hagdala, an increasement in Aleph Daled Nun Yud, which is what we're saying. Va'ata Yigdal na, it should become great. We said, what was the first interpretation? By bringing Chachma into Malchus. Remember, Adna is Malchus. By bringing Koach Adna into Malchus. Which means by revealing the source of speech in speech. By bringing the Koach of Chachma into Malchus. Like we said earlier from many Maimorim, the Pidush Yigdal Koach Adna, Sheti Agdala Ba'adna. There should be an increasement in Aleph Daled Nun Yud. Through us bringing into Adna the power of Adna, which is what? The power of Chachma, which is the source of Malchus. Sharshoy u'mekoyroi, its root and its source. But then there is a higher level. Then there is an increasement in Aleph Daled Nun Yud, Al Yedei Amshacha, through drawing down, B'pchenas HaSovev. Not from going to the quintessential beginning of the source of Malchut, which is in Chachma, from there. But that's because that's part of the Eser Sefirot. That's part of the system. It's the beginning of the system, but it's still part of the system. It's the more flexible energies of the system, but it's still the system. But there's a higher level where you go outside of the system completely. You go into the infinite light of what we call the Sovev. God as he precedes any form, any definition. It's above the entire order. The Sovev udugmas aratzah. Sovev kalam, and the encompassing light of God, is similar to what we call desire in a human being. Getting into the limitless energy of God, pre-definition completely. So if you can tap this and bring this into Malchus, it's a much greater increasement. You're not only increasing Adna, but you're increasing the Koach of Adna. Chachma itself, which is the father, which produces the daughter, even the father becomes embellished with a whole new energy. It's a whole new light from outside the system, utterly outside the system. Hashirish da Adna. Like the words imply, Yigdal. What did Moshe say? Not Yigdal Adna, Yigdal Koach Adna. That the Koach itself should become greater. Shetia Hagdala b'Koach Adna, in the Koach. Which, by the way, I think I missed a footnote somewhere, which is important. Where's 35? Oh, so let's see. How does it bring atonement? So now we'll understand. What did we say earlier? That a lot of times you conceive an idea and you have questions on the idea. Questions in the idea. But when you speak it, since through speech you're drawing down the root of the intellect, and in the root there's no questions, so all the questions fall away. That's even without will, even just through speech, because you're perceiving the concept in its purest form, and since the concept is true, so now let's. So what would this mean? When Malchut, when kingship itself gets angry and frustrated with the world, like we discussed earlier, has wounds, gets offended, gets hurt because of blemishes that we've done. That's called like questions on a concept. That's like God has questions on the world. God has questions on us. God feels knotted by us. He has all kinds of complaints. He has all kinds of, he's carrying all kinds of, and what did we learn? However, just like when you bring something into speech and you draw down the pre-intelligence, it brings suddenly such clarity. And the clarity suddenly, automatically, all the questions and contradictions become resolved. You don't even see it anymore. It's not there. It just, because you pulled the idea from a deeper place. The same happens in the power of Malchus when she gets frustrated with our sins and with our mistakes and something like that. When she is only perceiving an external understanding of creation and of the system of creation, she gets upset. But when she herself becomes sharper in what the whole purpose is, she doesn't get upset at sins and at things, because she can see much bigger. She can see it's a process. She can see it's a struggle. She can see it's a... And Malchus, like all the questions that there are in Malchus get flushed away suddenly in 1 second. That's even if you're not bringing in the 13 attributes of mercy. 13 attributes of mercy is bringing in the will. It's a complete flushing out of everything, a complete refurbishing of the whole, everything. That's even... But he's explaining that even just with Koach Adna, by bringing into Adna Koach Adna, which means drawing down the Chachma into Malchus, a richer idea that itself already refurbishes the Malchus. I literally had, I'm giving you a perfect, beautiful example for this. You know, amongst religious Jews, there are a lot of people who have a hard time. I'm saying this is particularly religious Jews, very observant. You might call them ultra-Orthodox. A lot of people have a very hard time with the miracles that are happening now in Israel and stuff. Everybody's happy, but they don't know how to reconcile it with the concept that it's a Zionist government that's having these miracles. And if you know, according to Torah, the modern day Zionistic government is not a kosher form of a government, meaning Israel is supposed to be run by a religious government, a Torah government, not a secular government. And the whole idea of Zionism to begin with, I don't mean Zionism the way it means it so in scripture term. The Herzl Zionism, the Zionism created which is that that the Jewish people are going to have a land of Israel, and that land of Israel is going to replace the emphasis on mitzvah observance, and we're going to become more of a nation. That idea of Zionism is completely rejected by most of Torah authority. So if that's the case, what happens? When you have now a government that is not religious, and an army that is not necessary, most soldiers in the army are not religious, And when they go and are fighting for Israel's survival, and God is performing miracles through them, like we've seen now, there's a hard time because, like, it's God's miracles, but how do you? It's the Zionists. People just don't know, and especially when someone like me comes along and starts saying that this is Mashiach unfolding and these are the miracles of the redemption. How do they eat this? They don't even know how to eat this. It doesn't. They don't know how to swallow it. It becomes so difficult to understand. Is God bringing Mashiach through the Zionists? It's like, I'm saying people. I'm talking about extreme Satmar. A lot of people just have a hard time with this whole concept. It doesn't make any sense to them. The Rebbe, for instance, although the Rebbe was the most anti-Zionist person, but yet the Rebbe was able to walk a thin line and differentiate between the fact that Israel has an army now that's protecting Jews, which is a holy mission and a holy job, and some of those ideas that are against the Torah, to be able to separate that. Okay, but I don't even want to go there. What I really mean is, so I watched a clip this week because I watched a clip this week of the Rebbe talking after Entebbe, when Israel did the most daring rescue attempt ever, to fly hundreds of miles into Africa over hostile territory, and to pull such an incredible stunt like Entebbe, which was just out of the world spectacular. So the Rebbe is talking about the soldiers who did that. Now, all these soldiers that took place in that rescue were all not religious. I don't know all, but many of them not religious at all. The one person who died was Netanyahu's brother, actually. One soldier was killed, and that was his brother. He was the commander of the whole operation. But in any case, so the Rebbe talks about that rescue mission. And the Rebbe says, and you just would never hear this from other rabbis. You will hear similar from a Daiti Lu'umi, from a Zionistic rabbi. But someone who's so against Zionism like the Rebbe, you would never. What does the Rebbe say? The Rebbe says that these soldiers, who risked their lives on such a mission, that they knew there's most chances they're not coming back alive. But at that moment, they willfully did it because they rose beyond their selfish, instinctive selves. And they tapped into their soul. And they strengthened their spirit over matter completely, to the point that all their physical considerations didn't mean anything to them. Their lives, their families, their everything. They risked it all to do what needs to be done with utter selflessness. So the Rebbe says, what is that? Oh, and these were the people that God chose them to be the emissaries. God chooses them to be the emissaries, to be able to save the lives of so many Jews who were in Entebbe. Must be that if God chose them, they have enormous power, spiritual power. So the Rebbe said, let it be that since they activated such selflessness, such spiritual powers in this raid, in this activity, that this should inspire them that in their daily lives they should also start empowering their soul over their bodies and to live a Torah godly life. So, what am I seeing over here? It's such an expansive view. And if you would know how to compare that to a narrow, from perspective, These are chilonim. These are secular Jews, chilonim. Yeah, he was sent on a mission. So what is? Okay, he did something nice. I'm sure he gets credit for that. But no, what are you seeing? You're seeing a secular Jew. You're seeing someone whose soul, who's chosen by God because he's got a super soul. Yes, he was born non-religious and wasn't brought up religious, but he's got an incredible, powerful neshama, and that neshama is now activated, and hopefully this will serve as a breaking ground that his soul should always be able to dominate. That's the blessing, and that's what we should work on bringing out. So what do we have over here? Instead of having a narrow, limited view of Torah and mitzvot, you keep the mitzvot good. If you don't keep it, you're whatever. So why am I using this example? Because when Malchus, when God has his plan, he wants Torah, he wants mitzvot. If it's only felt from a superficial place, then you get very, very when there's contradictions, when someone is not keeping a mitzvah, when someone is this, then it's like at the end of the world. But when you see deeper, when Malchus is enriched, and it doesn't only have, it's not only operating from the limited understanding, but it's got a puff from Chachma energy, from the Aints, from which is the Kadmos HaSeichel, which is the beginning, pre-intellect. Then you can sense there's something so much. There's a bigger plan here. There's a richer thing. There is the tshuva that is going to be, all these people that are sinning now are going to do tshuva tomorrow. And their enrichment and the effect of their tshuva is going to be so great. There's so much more tolerance. There's no more questions. You don't have any questions on a Jew. You don't have any more complaints. You're not seeing the sinner of the sinning. You're seeing much. I'm just using that as an example of the enrichment that happens in Malchus when you're mamshech Koach Adna, the shoresh from where Malchus comes. The Malchus itself, the king is judging by the book. It's a great book. You're keeping the laws, you're not keeping the laws. Oh, he's not keeping the laws. Oh, Gewalt. That's if you're looking just Malchus. But when you're looking at Malchus, as Malchus is rooted in Koach Adna, from the Chachma perspective, from it's a whole different. It's not just it's still Torah and mitzvot, but it's Torah and mitzvot enriched with such an deep, enriched, higher purpose that God doesn't question his world. He sees his world exactly perfectly moving in the right direction, with all the setbacks and with all the problems. It's all moving. It's all going. It's all part of it. It's a different story. But then there is higher than that. When you draw down the will itself, that makes a complete tikkun in everything. We're going to leave that Be'ezus Hashem for the next class, next week, Thursday, because he's going to explain how all of this is translated into our service. How do we activate all this phenomenal thing, Be'ezus Hashem? And it's gonna become much clearer, Be'ezrat Hashem, in next class. As we conclude this will be perfect to finish next week, Thursday, right before Gimel Tammuz, Be'ezrat Hashem, when it is so necessary to have the Yigdal now, Koach, Be'ezrat Hashem.